How many people in the United Kingdom truly possess £1 million? Is it a select few, a growing elite, or perhaps a number far greater than we imagine, hidden in plain sight, yet undeniably prosperous? What if the real story of 1 million in Britain today was not one of immense wealth, but of an entirely different, more profound struggle? I embarked on an investigation to uncover the truth, and what I found challenged every assumption about prosperity in our nation. The answers lay not in the gleaming towers of finance, but in the quiet, desperate corners of homes across the country. For many, the figure of £1 million conjures images of financial freedom, of security, of a life free from the relentless anxieties of bills and budgeting. It is a benchmark of success, a dream pursued by countless individuals. But as I delved deeper into the complex economic realities of the United Kingdom, I discovered a starkly different interpretation of that number. One that painted a far more unsettling and poignant picture of contemporary British life, revealing a truth both unexpected and deeply concerning. But before we continue, if you think this information is important and you want to stay ahead of these changes, please subscribe to my channel. I'm creating videos regularly about how to protect your retirement income and make the most of your savings. We're aiming to reach our first 1,000 subscribers, and your subscription really helps us grow this community. Let's make sure you're not caught off guard by these changes. My investigation began with a simple, seemingly straightforward question. Who in the UK really has 1 million? The common perception, fueled by glossy headlines and aspirational tales, often points to a rising tide of high net worth individuals. Yet the raw data I unearthed told a profoundly different story. Not of accumulated riches, but of accumulated hardship. It revealed a hidden crisis, a silent and pervasive struggle affecting a staggering number of our fellow citizens. The truth was a profound shock. It was not 1 million people enjoying the comfort of £1 million in assets. Instead, my research revealed that over 1 million households across the United Kingdom were, at the close of 2025, grappling with the crushing burden of energy debt. This was not a statistic of affluence, but a stark, undeniable measure of widespread financial distress. A silent testament to the immense pressures faced by families attempting simply to keep their homes warm, lit, and functional. This figure, more than 1 million households, represented a crisis of unprecedented scale and human impact. It was a number far exceeding the population of many major British cities. Each household within that statistic, a daily battleground against relentlessly rising costs. I learned that by the second quarter of 2025, specifically in June, 1,133,683 electricity customers and 926,545 gas customers were in debt without any formal repayment arrangements in place. A significant proportion of these struggling households owed money for both essential utilities. The sheer volume of these figures struck me profoundly. These were not just abstract statistics. They represented real lives, real dilemmas. Parents choosing agonizingly between food and heat. Pensioners struggling silently in cold, damp homes. And countless families trapped in a seemingly inescapable cycle of mounting arrears. This was the uncomfortable reality behind the number 1 million in the United Kingdom, a reality that demanded our urgent attention and understanding. What complex forces had converged to create such a widespread problem? As I continued my research, it became clear that this was no sudden occurrence, but the culmination of years of escalating costs and broader economic pressures.
The energy crisis, a global phenomenon triggered by geopolitical events, had landed particularly hard on British shores, exacerbating existing vulnerabilities and pushing millions into precarious financial situations. The stakes were alarmingly clear. The fundamental ability of ordinary people to afford basic necessities was under severe threat. The rising cost of living had become a relentless tide, steadily eroding savings and forcing countless families to make truly impossible choices. My journey into this crisis was just beginning, but the initial revelations had already painted a grim portrait of a nation grappling with a silent, yet pervasive economic struggle. To truly grasp the magnitude of this challenge, it was essential to trace its origins. The current crisis did not emerge overnight. Understanding its historical context provided crucial insight into how the nation arrived at this precipice. The seeds of this crisis were sown long before the current moment. I looked back to 2012. A time when the energy landscape felt markedly different, less volatile. Then, around 300,000 electricity customers and another 300,000 gas customers were behind on their bills without formal repayment plans. The average debt per customer hovered around £500 for both electricity and gas. These numbers, though certainly concerning, seemed almost manageable, even contained in retrospect. Fast forward to the end of 2020, just before the full impact of the global energy crisis began to bite deep. At that point, the total household energy debt across the United Kingdom stood at approximately £1.45 billion. It was a substantial sum, certainly, but it represented a different era, a fragile yet relatively stable baseline against which the coming storm would soon be measured. The calm before the storm was deceptive. Global events were about to send shockwaves through energy markets, with Britain feeling a particularly acute impact. Then came the seismic shifts. Global events, including the conflict in Ukraine and supply chain disruptions, sent wholesale energy prices soaring to unprecedented heights. The impact on ordinary households was immediate and brutal. What had been a manageable challenge for some quickly transformed into an insurmountable burden for many more. The numbers began to climb at an alarming rate. By the second quarter of 2024, the total household energy debt had already reached an alarming £3.69 billion. This marked a staggering 43% increase year on year and a 12% rise from the first to the second quarter of 2024 alone. The trajectory was undeniably clear, pointing towards a deepening crisis and deeply worrying. The situation continued its rapid deterioration throughout 2024. By the end of that year, the number of electricity customers in arrears without repayment plans had surged past 1 million. Gas customers in the same dire situation neared 1 million. The average electricity debt per customer had soared to £1,600, while gas debt approached £1,400, representing a crippling financial burden. My research showed that the first 6 months of 2025 added another £580 million to this escalating debt mountain. By the end of the second quarter of 2025, the total household energy debt had peaked at an astonishing £4.43 billion, a figure underscoring the severity of the crisis. This figure was more than triple the pre-energy crisis levels recorded at the end of 2020. The scale of the problem had become truly immense, overwhelming individual coping mechanisms. This dramatic surge in debt
was not merely a statistical anomaly. It represented the lived, often desperate, experience of millions. I heard countless reports from charities and support organizations detailing the desperate measures families were forced to take. 40% of households, for instance, resorted to wearing extra layers of clothing indoors to ward off the cold. This was a stark, almost Victorian image of modern hardship playing out in the 21st century. Beyond clothing, other sacrifices were made. Families cut back on essential nutrition or delayed critical medical appointments. One of the most concerning aspects of this crisis was its disproportionate impact on the most vulnerable. I learned that 16% of households earning under £20,000 annually owed money to energy suppliers before the winter of 2025 and 2026. Even more alarming, 12% of these low-income households, double the previous year's 6%, simply could not afford to repay their debts. The average household credit balances, once a small buffer for many, had plummeted. In 2025, they stood at just £98 per bill payer, a significant drop from £128 the previous year. For the first time since the energy crisis began, the average balance fell below £100, leaving little to no protection against unexpected costs. Low-income households, I found, averaged just £60 in debt, highlighting their extreme vulnerability. Understanding the human cost was one thing, but to truly address the crisis, one had to dissect its underlying economic drivers. Experts offered critical insights. My investigation into the causes of this debt revealed a complex interplay of factors. Robert Palmer, Deputy Director of Uplift, a non-profit organisation, pointed to a 70% increase in energy prices compared to 5 years prior. This dramatic hike meant that even with government support, the fundamental cost of keeping a home powered remained prohibitively high for many. The structure of energy bills itself contributed to the problem. Analysis by the Commonwealth think tank showed that 24% of every household energy bill was allocated to industry profits. This revelation sparked considerable public outcry as struggling families questioned why such a significant portion of their payments was not directly contributing to energy generation or infrastructure, but rather to corporate earnings. Furthermore, bill payers faced an additional charge of £145 annually on their bills, specifically to cover the collective costs of energy debt. This meant that even those who managed to stay afloat were, in essence, subsidizing the mounting arrears of their neighbors, creating a perverse and inequitable cycle of burden for everyone. The statistics painted a grim picture, but the true tragedy of the crisis was best understood through the voices of those directly affected. The advocacy groups fighting on their behalf. The human stories behind these numbers were heartbreaking. David Southgate, a policy manager from Independent Age, spoke of elderly individuals who were bedbound by cold, forced to wear hats and gloves indoors, their dignity eroded by the inability to afford adequate heating. These were not isolated incidents, but rather a widespread reality for many vulnerable members of society. Fraser Scott, the Chief Executive Officer of Energy Action Scotland, highlighted the relentless growth of debt, noting the £580 million added in just the first half of 2025. He stressed the urgent need for fundamental affordability fixes, arguing that piecemeal solutions were simply not enough to stem the tide of hardship and prevent further suffering. The End Fuel Poverty Coalition, a leading advocacy group, echoed these calls, campaigning for widespread debt write-offs and the implementation of social tariffs to protect the most vulnerable. They also vehemently opposed punitive fees, arguing that they only serve to deepen the despair of those already struggling. My investigation affirmed their warnings. The crisis was deepening, not receding. In the face of such overwhelming evidence and public outcry, regulatory bodies and the government were compelled to act. Their efforts provided some relief, yet also highlighted the immense scale. In response to this escalating crisis, some measures were put into motion. Ofgem, the UK's energy regulator, had been at the forefront, not just reporting grim statistics, but also attempting to implement solutions. They announced a debt relief scheme, with Phase 1 targeting up to 200,000 consumers who were on means-tested benefits. The aim was to reduce the overall debt stock by £500 million. This scheme, which launched in late 2025, represented a significant effort to alleviate the burden on some of the most vulnerable households. It was a recognition by the regulator that the problem had grown beyond individual capacity and required systemic intervention. Phase 2 was also planned, intending to extend support to an even wider group. The government also expanded its Warm Home Discount programme for the winter of 2025 and 2026. This initiative was projected to reach over 6 million households, including nearly 1 million with children, providing a much-needed financial lifeline during the coldest months. These interventions, while crucial, simultaneously illuminated the sheer scale of the need. Despite these commendable efforts, the economic headwinds remained powerful. Fundamental energy costs continued to exert immense pressure, ensuring fuel poverty loomed large for millions. Despite these efforts, the underlying challenges remained formidable. The total annual gas and electricity bills for direct debit households had risen to £1,755, up from £1,720. This incremental increase, combined with persistently high prices, 70% above 5 years ago, continued to exert immense pressure on household budgets. The End Fuel Poverty Coalition consistently highlighted the projected reality for the winter of 2025 and 2026, estimating that 6.3 million households would still be living in fuel poverty. This stark figure, calculated against a typical annual bill of £1,923, underscored the limitations of existing relief efforts against an overwhelming economic tide. It was a sobering reminder that for millions, the struggle for warmth and light was far from over. My investigation revealed that the story of 1 million in the United Kingdom was not about a surge in millionaires, but a tragic testament to the widespread financial fragility gripping the nation. It was a number that spoke of cold homes, impossible choices, and the quiet desperation of families struggling to survive. This was the true face of a profound economic challenge, a reality we must all confront with honesty and resolve. It implored us to look beyond the headlines of wealth and prosperity, and instead truly see the economic struggles faced by so many across our communities. Understanding this 1 million was the first vital step towards finding meaningful, lasting solutions and building a more equitable future for all citizens of the United Kingdom.